Why does the age-old conflict between Jews and Arabs continue to echo throughout history? Could the Bible hold the key to understanding this enduring strife? And even more surprisingly, could it offer hope for reconciliation? Let's uncover a powerful story from the past that might just change the way we see the world today. In this video, we'll dive deep into a conflict that's as old as time itself, the tension between the descendants of Isaac and Ishmael. But what if I told you that the Bible doesn't just explain why this conflict began, but also hints at a divine path to healing it? Let's explore the ancient roots of this strife and see how God's promises could lead to surprising reconciliation. Join me as we journey through biblical history, discovering the pivotal moments that shaped the relationship between these two nations. Together, we'll explore prophecies, divine promises, and the transformative hope that only faith can provide. Stay with me as we reveal how the story of Isaac and Ishmael might point toward a future of peace. 1. The promise and the first conflict. The story of the conflict between Jews and Arabs begins with a divine promise made to Abraham. In Genesis 17:19-21, God promises Abraham that he will be the father of many nations, and from his descendants will come blessings for all people on earth. God promises Abraham that his son, Isaac, will carry the covenant, but this promise would not be fulfilled immediately. Sarah, Abraham's wife, had been barren for many years, and in those days a woman's worth was often measured by her ability to bear children. As Abraham and Sarah grew older, the promise of a child seemed impossible, and Sarah grew desperate. In her desperation, Sarah offered her servant, Hagar, to Abraham so he could have a child through her. Hagar bore a son, Ishmael, and for 13 years he was the only son Abraham had. It was a human solution to a divine promise, but it soon became clear that this was not the path God had planned. The tension between Sarah and Hagar grew, and Sarah's feelings of inadequacy and jealousy caused strife in the household. This was not the fulfillment of God's promise, but rather the result of taking matters into their own hands. Then, when Abraham was 99 years old, God reaffirmed his promise that Sarah would bear him a son. Despite the years of waiting, God's plan was still unfolding. When Isaac was born, the tension between the two sons became unavoidable. Sarah saw Ishmael mocking Isaac, and in her fear for Isaac's inheritance, she demanded that Hagar and Ishmael be cast out. Abraham was heartbroken, but God assured him that Ishmael would also be blessed. However, the division between Isaac and Ishmael had begun. This event is foundational to understanding the conflict we see today. Isaac and Ishmael were not just two brothers with differing fortunes. Their conflict marks the beginning of two very different destinies, one blessed by the covenant, the other destined to become a great nation, but without the divine promise of the covenant. In today's world, this division has manifested in the ongoing struggles between Israel and the Arab nations. From the very beginning, the conflict between Isaac and Ishmael has been tied to human efforts to control God's promises. Instead of trusting in God's timing, Abraham and Sarah attempted to fulfill God's promise on their own terms. And while God did bless Ishmael, the reality remains that the covenant would pass through Isaac, setting the stage for centuries of tension, misunderstanding, and division. This biblical history reminds us that trusting in God's plan and timing is crucial, especially when things seem impossible. 2. Isaac and Ishmael, brothers with divided paths. Isaac and Ishmael's relationship was marked by tension from the very beginning. The Bible tells us that when Isaac was weaned, Sarah saw Ishmael mocking him, which led to Sarah demanding that Hagar and Ishmael be cast out. This event, recorded in Genesis 21:8-10, highlights the deep-seated division between the two brothers. Ishmael, as the firstborn, had once been Abraham's heir, but with Isaac's birth, the promise of God shifted to him. This was not just a family dispute, it was a spiritual struggle for legacy and identity. The tension between Isaac and Ishmael is more than just a sibling rivalry. It symbolizes the battle between human effort and divine purpose. In a way, Ishmael's mocking of Isaac was an assertion of his right to the inheritance, a claim to the promise that Isaac now held. This wasn't just a childish act. It reflected a deeper challenge to the divine order that had been set in motion through Isaac. Historically, this division has manifested in profound ways. Isaac became the father of the Jewish people, and Ishmael's descendants would come to be known as Arabs, with Islam emerging centuries later. The conflict between their descendants, especially in the Middle East, mirrors the ancient conflict between the two brothers. Ishmael's legacy, symbolized by the wild donkey, independent, strong, and often at odds with others, has marked the Arab nations with a sense of resilience and fierce independence. The wild donkey of a man described in Genesis 16:12 speaks to a people who have survived and thrived despite numerous challenges, but whose independence often leads to conflict with others. Meanwhile, Isaac's descendants have been marked by their covenant with God, a divine promise that has shaped the history of Israel. This covenant has been the foundation of Jewish identity, survival, and, tragically, many conflicts over the centuries. The struggle over inheritance, the spiritual and physical blessing, has been passed down through generations, leading to the modern-day geopolitical struggles between Jews and Arabs. At the heart of the Isaac-Ishmael conflict lies a profound lesson. God's will be done, regardless of human interference. Abraham's attempt to fulfill God's promise through Hagar was not the divine plan, but even in their rivalry, God remained faithful to both sons. The biblical narrative teaches us that while human efforts often lead to division and struggle, God's divine plan moves forward, and His promises are not thwarted by our mistakes. The challenge for both nations, Jewish and Arab, is learning to live in the reality of God's divine plan, even amidst the tension and the struggle for identity. 3. The prophecy of Ishmael, wild donkey or divine freedom. In Genesis 16:12, when the angel of the Lord speaks to Hagar, he gives a striking prophecy about her son, Ishmael. He describes him as a wild donkey of a man, whose hand will be against everyone and everyone's hand against him. This prophecy paints a picture of Ishmael's descendants as a people marked by independence, conflict, and resilience. But what does this wild donkey really mean? In ancient times, the wild donkey was known for its untamable nature. It symbolized freedom, a refusal to be controlled, and an enduring spirit of survival against all odds. The description isn't an insult, but a powerful image of a people who would refuse to be subdued, a trait that has carried through the centuries. Ishmael's descendants would become known for their fierce independence, not just in their interactions with others, but even among themselves. This prophecy is seen in the ongoing internal divisions within the Arab world, particularly between the Sunni and Shia branches of Islam, but it also speaks to something deeper. Ishmael's independence isn't just physical, it's spiritual. The Arab nations have historically been resistant to outside control, carving their own path in the world. This resistance, while a sign of strength, has often led to conflict, internally and externally. Whether through empire building or the challenges of modern geopolitics, the prophecy's words resonate in the ongoing struggles in the Middle East, where nations are constantly asserting their right to self-determination. However, this wildness isn't without its blessing. Despite the struggles and conflicts, Ishmael's descendants have thrived. The Bible is clear that God would make Ishmael into a great nation, and history has proven this prophecy true. From the rise of powerful empires in the Arab world to the cultural, scientific, and religious contributions made over the centuries, Ishmael's legacy of resilience and independence has left an undeniable mark on the world. For the faithful, this teaches a profound lesson about the nature of divine prophecy. While the path may be fraught with challenges, God's promises remain. Ishmael's story serves as a reminder that God's plans are often realized through struggle, and that independence, though costly, is part of His design. The prophecy of Ishmael also challenges us to recognize the untamed, resilient nature of human spirit and how it aligns with God's ultimate purpose, one that does not seek to control, but to empower. Ultimately, the story of Ishmael teaches us that, even in conflict and strife, God's plans can still unfold, and there is blessing to be found in the most unlikely places. 4. The tension builds. Sarah's reaction and the expulsion of Hagar. In Genesis 21:9-14, the tension between Isaac and Ishmael reaches a breaking point. Sarah, Isaac's mother, sees Ishmael mocking her son, and in her jealousy and fear for Isaac's future, she demands that Abraham cast out Hagar and Ishmael. This moment in Scripture is heartbreaking for Abraham as he loves Ishmael deeply, yet God tells him to listen to Sarah, assuring him that Ishmael will be blessed and become a great nation in his own right. The tension here isn't just familial, it's theological, marking the beginning of a deeper spiritual divide. The expulsion of Hagar and Ishmael symbolizes the rift between Isaac and Ishmael, between the spiritual inheritance through Isaac and the earthly promise given to Ishmael. For Abraham, it is a painful choice. Ishmael was his firstborn, the child he longed for during years of waiting. But the covenant promise would not pass through Ishmael, it would pass through Isaac. Historically, this moment reflects a key theological lesson. God's plan is often difficult to understand and harder still to accept. Abraham's anguish in sending away his firstborn son reflects the deep sorrow of any parent forced to choose between children, but it also highlights the tension between divine sovereignty and human emotion. The covenant that God made with Abraham would pass through Isaac, not Ishmael, even though both were promised blessings. This marks a clear distinction between the two sons' destinies, one chosen to carry God's covenant, the other to be a great nation, but without the promise of the covenant. This event also marks a significant moment in the spiritual history of Israel. The expulsion of Ishmael echoes in the future struggles between Israel and the Arab nations, descendants of Isaac and Ishmael. Throughout history, these two groups have been locked in a battle over land, identity, and divine favor. The modern political conflicts in the Middle East can be traced back to this ancient rift, where the struggle for legitimacy and inheritance continues to this day. But even in this painful moment, there is hope. God's promise to bless Ishmael was not withdrawn. Ishmael would become a great nation, just not through the covenant God made with Isaac. This reminds us that even when faced with difficult decisions or seeming rejection, God's plans remain intact, and His blessings are not bound by human expectations. For the faithful, this teaches that God's sovereignty extends even over the most painful moments in life. 5. The divine promise for Ishmael. In Genesis 21:17-19, after being cast into the wilderness, Hagar and Ishmael are on the brink of despair. With no water and the heat of the desert weighing heavily upon them, it seems all hope is lost. But in this dark moment, God intervenes. An angel appears to Hagar and reassures her that her son will not perish. God shows her a well of water, reviving them both, and repeats the promise that Ishmael will become a great nation. This moment of divine provision is not just about physical survival. It is a powerful reminder of God's faithfulness, even in our most desperate circumstances. Despite Ishmael not being part of the covenant promise, God's compassion and mercy are evident. He blesses Ishmael, making it clear that His care extends to all people, not just those within the covenant line of Isaac. The symbolism of God's provision in the wilderness is significant. In biblical terms, the wilderness often represents a place of trial, testing, and encounter with God. It is here that God's presence is most profoundly felt, where He speaks to His people when they have nowhere else to turn. In Ishmael's case, the wilderness is not a place of abandonment, but one of encounter. God's intervention in the desert is a powerful act of grace, showing that even in isolation, God sees and hears our cries. The promise given to Ishmael is also a foreshadowing of God's broader plan for the nations. While Ishmael's line would not inherit the covenant, his descendants would thrive and form great empires. This reflects the reality that God's blessings can manifest in different ways, sometimes as earthly success and other times as spiritual inheritance. Ishmael's blessing, though not the covenant, demonstrates that God's love is not limited to one people, but extends to all nations, as He promised Abraham in Genesis 17:4-5. For the faithful today, this story provides a deep lesson in God's grace and faithfulness. When we feel forsaken or isolated, God is near, providing exactly what we need in our most desperate moments. Just as He was with Hagar and Ishmael in the wilderness, He is with us in our own struggles. The divine promise to Ishmael teaches us that God's care transcends human understanding. His blessings are available to all, even in the midst of hardship. In a world filled with divisions, this story serves as a reminder that God's mercy reaches far beyond our expectations and brings hope even to the most unlikely places. 6. The legacy of Isaac and Ishmael, the birth of nations. In Genesis 17:20-21 and Genesis 25:12-18, we see the fulfillment of God's promises to both Isaac and Ishmael. Isaac, the son of the covenant, becomes the father of the Jewish people. His descendants inherit the divine covenant God made with Abraham, which establishes Israel as a nation chosen by God to carry out His plan of salvation for the world. Meanwhile, Ishmael, though excluded from the covenant, becomes the father of a great nation as well. The 12 princes descended from him represent the Arab nations, and the promise of his blessings is seen in the vast and diverse cultural, political, and historical contributions of these nations. This distinction between Isaac's covenantal blessing and Ishmael's promise of earthly greatness is central to understanding the dynamics between Israel and the Arab nations. While Isaac's descendants carry the spiritual inheritance, Ishmael's descendants are blessed with power, wealth, and influence in the world. Throughout history, we have witnessed the rise of great empires among the Arab nations, including the Umayyads, Abbasids, and Ottomans, showcasing the fulfillment of God's promise to make Ishmael a great nation. However, despite these blessings, the division between Isaac and Ishmael remains a source of tension. The question of inheritance, spiritual versus earthly, continues to fuel the modern-day conflict between Jews and Arabs. The land of Israel, which God promised to Isaac's descendants, is a focal point of this dispute. The desire for control over this sacred land has been at the heart of centuries of conflict. But this conflict is not just about land, it's about legacy, identity, and divine favor. The descendants of Isaac and Ishmael have both been deeply marked by their ancestral heritage. For the Jewish people, the covenant with God has shaped their identity and their survival through centuries of persecution. For the Arab nations, Ishmael's legacy of independence and resistance has fostered a strong sense of pride and resilience, but also internal and external conflict. Yet, the Bible shows that God's purposes are not confined to one group or another. While the nations descended from Isaac and Ishmael have been divided, the biblical promise reveals that both will be blessed and have roles to play in God's greater plan. This speaks to the reality that even in division, God is working out His plan for reconciliation and blessing. For the faithful, this is a call to understand that our identities, both personal and national, are not defined merely by inheritance, but by God's grace and divine purpose. In light of this, we are called to seek peace, understanding, and reconciliation in the face of division. 7. The clash over sacred land. The struggle for sacred land, particularly Jerusalem, lies at the heart of the ongoing conflict between Jews and Arabs. In Genesis 22:2 and 2 Chronicles 3:1, we find that Jerusalem is deeply connected to God's promises. The Temple Mount, a place of profound significance for both Jews and Arabs, is where Abraham prepared to sacrifice Isaac. It is also the location of the Jewish temple, and later the site of the Dome of the Rock in Islamic tradition, where the Prophet Muhammad is believed to have ascended to heaven. This small, sacred area has become a battleground, not just for land, but for identity, divine favor, and history itself. For Jews, the Temple Mount is the holiest site, the center of their faith, and a symbol of their covenant with God. It's a place where they believe God's presence once dwelled. For Muslims, the Dome of the Rock marks a pivotal moment in the life of Muhammad and represents their connection to God's divine will. The clash between these two spiritual legacies has turned this site into a symbol of a deeper theological struggle. The question is not just about control over land, but the legitimacy of each religion's claim to the space that holds such profound spiritual significance. Throughout history, Jerusalem has been conquered, destroyed, rebuilt, and fought over. Its significance has shaped the course of the Middle East, and to this day it remains a focal point in the ongoing Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The land is not just a physical space, it is a spiritual battleground where ancient promises and prophecies collide. The struggle for Jerusalem is a reflection of the broader struggle between Isaac and Ishmael's descendants. It is a fight over who truly inherits God's blessing. Yet, the Bible offers a profound insight into how to approach such conflict. While the land is central to the dispute, the true inheritance in God's kingdom is not confined to any one people or place. The struggle for Jerusalem is ultimately a struggle for divine truth and reconciliation, a theme that resonates with all of humanity. The land is not ours to claim. It is God's, and His plan for it transcends human conflict. As believers, we are reminded that while sacred spaces are deeply meaningful, they should not become idols of division. Our faith calls us to recognize the ultimate unity that God desires for His people. Despite centuries of war and division, the hope of reconciliation lies not in conquering land, but in conquering hearts for peace, love, and understanding. The legacy of Isaac and Ishmael teaches us that true inheritance comes from God's divine will and not from earthly power. 8. A surprising prophecy of reconciliation. In Genesis 25:9, a remarkable moment occurs that gives us a glimpse of hope for reconciliation between the descendants of Isaac and Ishmael. After decades of separation, the two brothers, Isaac and Ishmael, reunite to bury their father Abraham. This moment of unity stands in stark contrast to their long history of rivalry and division. Isaac, the chosen son of the covenant, and Ishmael, the son of the promise to be a great nation, come together to honor their father. The fact that they are both involved in this significant act, despite their past, speaks volumes about the potential for reconciliation. For centuries, the descendants of Isaac and Ishmael have been locked in a conflict over land, identity, and divine favor. But the act of burying Abraham together is seen by many as a prophetic symbol that one day, despite the years of enmity, the two nations might find a way to reconcile. The Bible's depiction of this reconciliation offers hope that, in time, division can give way to peace. The order of their names in this passage is also significant. Isaac's name is mentioned first, which suggests the primacy of the covenantal promise passed down through him. However, Ishmael's inclusion in this moment shows that while Isaac holds the spiritual legacy, God has not forgotten Ishmael. God's promise to bless Ishmael and make him into a great nation remains intact, even though he is not part of the covenant. This act of reconciliation, despite the spiritual differences between Isaac and Ishmael, represents a larger, hopeful vision of healing and unity. This moment of reconciliation holds profound spiritual significance for us today. It reminds us that no matter how deep the divisions or how long the history of conflict, reconciliation is possible through mutual respect and the shared acknowledgement of our common heritage. In our own lives, we are called to embody this same spirit of reconciliation. We may face divisions with others, whether personal, political, or ideological, but God's Word reminds us that healing can occur when we come together in a spirit of unity and respect. For the descendants of Isaac and Ishmael, this biblical story foreshadows a future where the long-standing conflict may give way to peace. This story challenges us to ask ourselves, how can we, as individuals and as communities, embody this reconciliation today? It's a question worth pondering, especially in a world filled with division and strife. 9. The Abraham Accords, modern-day reconciliation. In recent years, a surprising shift has occurred in the Middle East with the signing of the Abraham Accords. In 2020, Israel, the United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain agreed to normalize relations, marking the first time in decades that Arab nations officially recognized Israel. This agreement, which was named after the common ancestor Abraham, is a significant moment in history, a hopeful sign of reconciliation between the descendants of Isaac and Ishmael. It is not just a political move. It is a gesture that acknowledges a shared heritage and a shared spiritual father. The Abraham Accords are deeply symbolic. By invoking the name of Abraham, These agreements highlight the common root shared by Jews and Arabs. This step toward peace challenges the narrative of eternal conflict and offers a new possibility for cooperation, understanding, and mutual respect. The focus of the Accords was not solely on the land dispute, but on fostering economic, cultural, and diplomatic ties between Israel and the Arab world. This shift reflects the recognition that despite theological and political differences, both sides share a deep connection to the same patriarch, Abraham. But the Abraham Accords are more than just political agreements. They carry profound spiritual implications. The Bible speaks of a time when the descendants of Isaac and Ishmael will find a way to live in peace. These recent diplomatic developments may represent a small but significant step in fulfilling that prophecy. While peace may still seem distant for some, these agreements show that reconciliation, while difficult, is possible when both sides are willing to acknowledge their shared history and look toward a better future. For believers, the Abraham Accords provide a glimmer of hope that God's promises of reconciliation are at work in the world today. The historical enmity between Israel and many Arab nations has deep roots, but the possibility of peace is not only a political question, it's a spiritual one. It challenges us to see beyond the headlines and recognize that reconciliation begins with understanding, shared respect, and a willingness to seek common ground. While this peace may not be perfect, it offers a model for the broader world. If the descendants of Isaac and Ishmael can find ways to come together, then there is hope for other conflicts to find resolution. The Abraham Accords are a reminder that even in the most divided of times, God's plan for reconciliation is still unfolding. For the faithful, this moment is a sign that God is at work, moving hearts toward peace. 10. The role of Jesus in reconciliation, a new humanity. The Bible offers us the ultimate hope for reconciliation through the coming of Jesus Christ. In Ephesians 2:14-16, Paul writes that Christ is our peace, who has made both one and has broken down the dividing wall of hostility. This powerful verse speaks to the heart of the conflict between Jews and Arabs, between Isaac's and Ishmael's descendants. Jesus doesn't take sides in this ancient dispute. Instead, he creates a new humanity, a new identity that transcends these divisions. In Christ, the labels of Jew or Arab, Isaac's or Ishmael's descendants are no longer the ultimate defining factors. What matters is the unity found in Christ. Jesus' life, death, and resurrection provide the foundation for peace. He didn't come to perpetuate divisions, but to heal them. The very essence of his mission was to tear down the walls of separation that sin had built between us and God, and between each other. Jesus' sacrifice on the cross offers us the opportunity to be reconciled with God, but also with one another. In the context of the conflict between the descendants of Isaac and Ishmael, the teachings of Jesus challenge both sides to look beyond historical grievances and embrace a new way of living. In Matthew 5:9, Jesus says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God." His call to be peacemakers is not a passive one. It requires active work in overcoming hostility and division. Jesus doesn't just provide peace, he calls us to be agents of peace in the world. For Christians, this means that the reconciliation of the nations, including Jews and Arabs, is not just a distant hope for the future. It begins in the hearts of believers today. We are called to embody Christ's peace in our relationships with others, no matter their background or heritage. The gospel invites us to look past the walls of division and to extend grace and forgiveness to all people, as Christ did for us. The coming of Jesus changes everything. It offers a new path for humanity, a path that leads not to more conflict, but to the unity of all people under the banner of God's love. The reconciliation that Jesus offers is not just spiritual, it's a physical and relational reality. In him, all divisions, whether between nations, peoples, or individuals, can be overcome. In a world still torn by division, the message of Jesus is revolutionary. He offers not just a way to live, but a way to truly reconcile. The hope for ultimate peace lies not in human effort, but in the divine intervention of Christ, who is our peace. Conclusion. As we reflect on the ancient conflict between Isaac and Ishmael, we see how their story has echoed through the centuries, shaping the tensions we face today. The struggle for inheritance, land, and divine favor is not just a historical tale. It's a living, breathing reality that continues to influence the Middle East and the world. Yet, the Bible doesn't leave us without hope. The story of reconciliation between Isaac and Ishmael, seen in their shared moment at Abraham's grave, foreshadows a future where division can give way to peace. The Abraham Accords serve as a hopeful sign, showing that even amidst the deepest divisions, the possibility for peace and cooperation is real. But the ultimate reconciliation, the one that will heal every wound and break down all barriers, is found in Jesus Christ. He is the true peacemaker, offering a new identity for all who believe, a new humanity that transcends every earthly divide. In this world, marked by conflict and division, the message of Jesus remains clear. True peace is possible. It doesn't come through political maneuvering or human effort alone, but through the transformative power of God's love. When we choose to live as Christ did, seeking reconciliation, showing grace, and building bridges, we become part of that divine work of healing. As we look to the future, let us hold on to the hope that God's plan of reconciliation is unfolding, and that through Christ, all things can be made new. Just as Isaac and Ishmael found a moment of peace, so too can we, through Jesus, find true unity. Let this story inspire us to pursue peace in our own lives and share the love of Christ with all who are divided.